All right, we got 10 seconds. I'm about to unmute your mic. Welcome to the Stochastic MLB Strategy Show. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. I'm also your producer. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Adam Ship My Money Scherer. You can find him on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And of course, this show is sponsored by Bet365, which has an incredible offer for people in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, and Virginia. Unfortunately, it's just those four states, but it is an incredible offer. So we will talk about that a little bit later. While you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. Also, don't forget to sign up for the Stochastic Hall of Fame by changing your avatar on DraftKings and FanDuel. Just download the Stochastic avatar from stochastic.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants, and tweet your wins to @Stochastic HOF account. If you have Twitter, or email us with your screenshot, you'll win a free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum by getting into the Hall of Fame. And of course, you will also get put in Lofty's Hall of Fame video. A lot of fun there. So make sure you sign up, use our avatar. Adam, we've got a 10-game slate here to go through. I think we're going to go game by game here through this 10-gamer. First of all, how's your MLB season going? How are you enjoying the transition from NBA to MLB?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's nice having lineups and not having to guess minutes and shit. It's been a decent start to the season. Got a 4th place finish in the big FanDuel tournament the other day, so nothing special there, but always nice to at least be close to the top. Been playing a lot more cash recently than I do in NBA, so that's been good. Yeah, so no big wins yet or anything. I'm not like Steve winning every night right out of the gate, but
yep.
I've been pretty happy with my process and how things have gone so far.
And you're playing FanDuel again. I know you go through phases where you do play FanDuel, and then you go through periods where you don't play FanDuel at all. But you're back.
I typically try and play FanDuel more when I'm playing cash games. The one thing that I think they do better than DraftKings is that they have they have so many single entry 100-man 50-50s. They have like the 100-player contest. So I think it's just a little bit easier to make money in cash games there than on DraftKings, where you're playing against like the same 10 regulars in everything. So yeah, I do typically try and play there more when I'm playing cash.
Yep, makes sense. Any overarching thoughts about this slate, or are you ready to just jump in game by game?
No, I think we can just go game by game.
All right, we'll do it. So first game on the slate is Toronto versus Detroit. Pretty big spread here. We've got Alek Manoah on the mound for Toronto, Matt Manning for the Tigers. Toronto has a nearly 6-run implied total. Tigers just over 3. We'll start with the pitchers, though. How much interest, if any, do you have in Matt Manning and or Alek Manoah?
Not particularly interested in Manning, certainly interested in Manoah. I just finished running, obviously, a way too early crunch, but Manoah was showing up around 13% of the time for me on DraftKings. Matt Manning was not, so I didn't get to him, but Manoah is just a good price tag, good matchup, good pitcher. This slate is kind of weird in that you have 2 very, very clear aces at the top in DeGrom and Ohtani, and they are relatively inexpensive. But that's also amplified by the fact that hitting is really inexpensive. Coors Field's going to just be a problem tonight. The Cardinals are free. You can basically just play Jacob deGrom plus Shohei Ohtani plus the team with the highest implied run total on the slate. So it pushes guys like Manoah down a little bit in terms of being a priority because it's just so easy to get to deGrom and Ohtani. But moving beyond those 2 guys, Manoah still certainly looks very good.
Yeah, what do you think is going on with this? The pricing. I feel like the pitchers in general have been very, very rarely above 10,000 this year. I think in years past, some of these pitchers would be 12,000. You think that's just like an early season MLB thing that they're going to change throughout the year?
Yeah, I don't know. They kind of went back and forth with this last year too. There were a lot of times it was just like, man, like, and you really notice it on the Coors Field slates because they did kind of just drive down pitcher pricing in general last year, and then they would also just have the away team in Coors be priced like they weren't playing in Coors. So I don't even hate it from a tournament standpoint. It sucks in that basically you're put in a position where either you have to play these really popular hitters or you are risking just like going 0 for 150 in tournaments because they're going to be so popular. But in baseball, it is kind of nice because like the best spots still fail so frequently that, I think as long as, you can just sort of mentally and financially withstand the variance, like over the course of a season, I think you're likely to make more money if pricing is just forcing the entire field onto one team than when pricing is actually correct.
Yeah, you're just going to go through some slates where you just win nothing back.
Right.
But if you can withstand that, yeah, it's if you have the bankroll for it, yeah, it's probably more positive EV in the long run. That's a good point. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of annoying for cash games because like you don't have to be particularly good or know what you're doing to realize that you can just play 5 Cardinals and the 2 best pitchers.
Right. That's good. Yeah. All right. In this game, Toronto, Detroit. So you have interest in Manoah, not a lot of interest in Manning, but Manoah, you think it's still going to be kind of tough to get there just because because of Ohtani and DeGrom making it tough to get there? Or do you think you're still going to be? What do we have Manoah projected for ownership? Let's see here. I'm using
like
a different.
33%.
Okay, 33. Do you imagine you're going to be above or below the field there?
If it started right now, I'd be well below. I'm getting like 13%, which it's kind of, again, it's just that if the slate started right now, would just be jamming in so much DeGrom and Ohtani that my next highest owned pitcher after those 2 guys is only 17%. Then it's Manoah at 13%. So it's just really that I'm not getting a lot of anybody that isn't DeGrom or Ohtani. It's not that I really necessarily disagree with the Manoah ownership by itself. It's just that DeGrom and Ohtani are just on another tier.
Yeah, makes sense. Adam, who do you think is going to win the Wolves game tonight?
Who are they playing?
The Lakers in LA.
Lakers.
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that.
I'm also biased. So.
Oh, do you have a bet on it or something?
I have Lakers to win the Western Conference.
Oh wow. Okay, that is some bet. When did you place it?
Whatever. Right before Kyrie got traded to Dallas, when the reports came out that he wanted to go to the Lakers, I bet it. I think I got like 17-1.
Okay.
I think what it is.
Nice. All right. Well, I hope the Wolves win. I don't feel confident in it, especially with both Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels out tonight.
Yeah,
but
not great.
And Naz Reid. But yeah, I can dream. All right. How about the bat? So on the other side of this, obviously Toronto looks a lot better than Detroit. Do you think you'll play any Detroit? Tell me about your level of interest in both of these teams as stacks or as individual bats, if you prefer one-offs.
Yeah, not really interested in Detroit. I think Manoah is a very good pitcher. You could certainly make the case that because he's pulling 33% ownership, you could look to get bats against him. But Detroit's just not a particularly appealing offense to get to. They do have a really high top value percentage, but that's kind of like the only thing they have going for them. On the Toronto side, certainly more interested in getting there. Ownership is pretty much in line with their top stack percentage. Manning did show some signs of life last year. He's a former top pitching prospect for Detroit, and he was really, really disappointing early on in the majors. Did kind of start to show some of that talent towards the end of last season. But overall, since the beginning of last year, 20% strikeout percentage to righties, 16 to lefties. He's done a very good job limiting power to righties, but the righties in the Toronto lineup are just such good hitters that I'm not overly concerned about that. Lefties have done a little bit more damage against him. 166 expected ISO since the start of last year. You don't have a ton of left-handed power on Toronto, but Dalton Varsho is going to look pretty solid, assuming he's hitting cleanup. And then the righties, Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Chapman, you can kind of just play them against anybody.
Yep, and we've got Toronto 7.5% chance to be in the top stack on the board, 7.2% ownership. So looks like fairly neutral in terms of top stack odds, but those are third on the board in terms of top stack odds overall. Anything else about this game before we move on?
If you were going to look to Detroit bats, there's not much about Manoah that stands out, but he does have a much lower strikeout percentage against lefties than righties, only 18.5% last year compared to 27.5% to righties, 157 expected ISO. So again, he's not a pitcher that you're looking at it and expecting him to really have trouble with anyone. But I think if you were looking to go to the Tigers, you go Badu, Green, Kerry Carpenter as the primary options.
Okay. Obi-Wan says Dustin May do an MLB show. So Adam, of all of the people that you can get compared to on these shows, your lookalikes, who do you find the most offensive and who are you most flattered by?
Dustin May, without a doubt, the most offensive. I'm not sure anyone has ever actually. CJ Cron's a good one. I can actually see that one, and we have the same birthday. I don't know who. I don't remember who else they compare me to. Normally, I don't agree with them, but
Carson Wentz.
Yeah, the Carson Wentz one is decent. There's that one picture where I can see it.
I don't think it's a very flattering picture of Carson Wentz. The one that you're talking about, like he's got like kind of pockmarked. It looks like
yeah. But it's just the general.
Other than that, yeah. So none that you find particularly flattering. You're just mostly offended.
Yeah, mostly offended. And the Dustin May thing is just because Lofty can't get over the fact that he looks like Davis Bertans.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been flattered by anybody that anybody's compared me to on a show. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. Usually it's like super fat and bald guys, so don't love that as much. All right, David Peterson and Ryan Weathers. Peterson for the bets, of course. Weathers for the Padres. We've got a 5-run implied total for the Mets, 4 for the Padres, more or less. Any interest in David Peterson or Ryan Weathers here?
Getting around like 12% Peterson. Again, like he's cheap. He's a good strikeout pitcher. The matchup sucks, but he does have good strikeout stuff. You shouldn't be expecting him to get too much ownership. We haven't projected around 9%. So I'm more or less in the ballpark there. It's just a matter of, if I do need to pay down to that price range, there's enough upside there. I don't really see getting to Weathers. He's really young. Maybe at some point he'll end up being good, but so far he really hasn't been. And it's not like he has a great matchup against the Mets either.
Yep. Okay, so Sportsbook is saying Neil looks like every plumber at the start of an adult film. See what I mean? These are the people that I compare it to. I guess it does. There are some nice implications there as well. So thank you, Sportswiz. Appreciate the compliment. What you're imagining about me. All right. What about? I mean, obviously, two of the better stacks in MLB in general, the Mets and the Padres. Any interest in playing them tonight, though, in this matchup?
Yeah, there's not much ownership coming into the Mets, which I think is really interesting. We have him with a 4.5% chance of being the top stack, 2.5% ownership. And like I said, Weathers, he does have talent. The Padres do think that at some point he'll figure out how to pitch in the major leagues, but in a limited sample so far, hasn't really shown it. Since the start of the 2021 season, just a 17.5% strikeout percentage to righties, 17% to lefties, 189 expected ISO to lefties, 185 to righties. So hasn't done a great job limiting power either. And you just get a good Mets lineup. Like you said, they're typically going to be an appealing stack as long as they're not facing a top tier pitcher, which Weathers certainly isn't. Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso, Pham, Kana, like these guys all can just do damage top to bottom in this lineup. So them not getting much ownership is appealing. And then on the other side for San Diego, they're not getting ownership either. They're right behind the Mets in terms of top stack percentage. I think the matchup is more difficult for them against Peterson than it is for the Mets against Weathers. But it's not like Peterson is a true ace either. He's a solid enough pitcher, but you just have so much talent on the Padres that I think both sides of this game are sort of interesting in large field tournaments just because you're not getting any ownership coming into a bunch of really good hitters against mediocre to slightly above average pitchers.
So do you prefer either of these teams as one-offs or as stacks with the low ownership? Like, are you inclined to get to full stacks of the Mets or Padres, or are you more inclined to just play some of these bats as, unowned one-offs?
I don't have a huge preference, but I do think it's kind of a spot where, like, if you're building 150 lineups, I don't think there's a lot you can do to control it. But like, if I were just thinking about playing one lineup and how I wanted to approach it, these are both teams that I think I would be more inclined to full stack because neither pitcher is just like a true gas can where you're expecting them to just give up a ton of power. Ryan Weathers more so than Peterson, but like I kind of view it more as if Peterson's on top of his game, the Padres probably aren't going to have a good game. Like Peterson's good enough to get them out, but if Peterson's not on top of his game, then it's just good for the entire Padres team. But like I don't look at Peterson and see like, oh yeah, well, like I don't know how he gets out Manny Machado, or I don't know how he gets out Juan Soto. Like if he's on top of his game, he's just a good pitcher. So I'd be more inclined if I have the choice to either be all or nothing.
Okay. Anything else from this game?
No.
All right. Next up, we've got the Braves at the Reds. Kyle Wright on the mound for the Braves. Luis Cessa for the Reds. First, we'll start with the pitchers. Adam, Kyle Wright's 9,300. Luis Cessa 6,700. Any interest in either of them tonight?
Kyle Wright, somewhat interesting, but on this slate, I just don't think that he's going to end up being that big of a priority. We have him getting about 12% ownership. I'm getting around 9%. He's making his first start of the season. He did throw 84 pitches over 6 innings in his final rehab start. He was solid last year. He's got a good matchup here. So I am somewhat interested just because, all of that is working in his favor and he's not projected for a ton of ownership. But the Ohtani and the ground pieces again sort of just keep me from getting to too much right. As far as Cessa goes, I'm good avoiding him against the Braves and their 5.5 implied run total.
Do you set any kind of, I mean, we don't have to get into your process. I'm not trying to get you to do a high stakes show now on a baseball show, but did you set any kind of cap on pitchers, or do you just kind of let it happen how it happens with pitchers?
Combination. So I set a cap when I build my lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, but then once I take those lineups out of Fantasy Cruncher and start going through and figuring out which ones I'm going to play, I don't cap it at that point. So like, in the 1,500, for example, I built 1,500 lineups before the show. I had it capped for like Ohtani not to show up more than 20% of the time. DeGrom couldn't show up more than 26%. But then once I get all of that and start sorting it, I still end up getting like 60% Ohtani or something.
Okay. And you sort in Excel outside of Fantasy Cruncher, is that right? I'm in the minority that I do everything in Fantasy Cruncher. All right. How about the bats on the other side of this? Obviously, the Braves generally look pretty good. Cincinnati generally not quite so much. We've got the Reds have a 3.5 run implied total. The Braves at 5.5. Tell me about your level of interest in either of these teams as stacks or one-offs.
Yeah, certainly much more interested in the Braves here. They're also not getting much ownership. Again, this is the benefit of what I was saying at the top of the show when you talk about large field tournaments and broken pricing on offenses. The Cardinals collectively are projected for 33.8% ownership. So every single offense on the slate, other than the Cardinals, is projected for single-digit ownership today. The Braves coming in at 4%. When you look at the top stacks tool, the Braves are fourth. The three teams ahead of them in terms of aggregate ownership are the Cardinals at 34%, Seattle at 9%, Toronto at 7%. Then you get the Braves down to 4%. So, I get that it's a little bit more difficult to get to them because they're relatively expensive, especially at the top of the order. But I love the upside that they give you at low ownership. As far as the Reds go, you could make the case that, it is Kyle Wright's first start back. He did struggle in his most recent rehab start. Maybe there's, some added volatility there. But the counter argument, and I think the one that I am more inclined to agree with, is that the Reds suck, and I don't really want to play them.
Yeah. And Kyle Wright, I think pitched like 80 some pitches in his last start.
84.
84 in was it AAA, I assume, or
wherever
he was, he pitched a good number. So seems to be like he should be able to pitch almost a full game here.
It was 6 innings, 84 pitches at AAA.
Okay, at AAA. All right.
His velocity was down, and he gave up 5 runs. But
okay, so that is a concern, and maybe a reason to play the Reds if they're not getting any ownership. You can think about playing them there.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the case is like
they're probably not playing them. But you can,
maybe Kyle Wright is just flat, but it's kind of different on the slate too because most teams aren't getting ownership other than the Cardinals. So sure, I can play the Reds at no ownership, but I could also just play the Braves at not much ownership or the Angels at not much ownership.
Right. Okay. Harry Evans, welcome to Team Stochastic. I don't know what that means. When you join Team Stochastic, is that you subscribe? I don't know what it means, but welcome. Happy to have you here. All right. Anything else about this game before the Braves or the Reds before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Then we've got my Twins at the White Sox. Pablo Lopez on the mound for the Twins. Lance Lynn for the White Sox. The Twins have a 4.5 run implied total. The White Sox 3.5. Tell me about your level of interest. We'll start with the pitchers again. Pablo Lopez or Lance Lynn. Think you'll be playing either of them today?
A little bit of both. Lopez coming in around 17% for me right now. Lynn around 9%. So that puts me a little bit over the field on Lynn and a little bit under the field on Lopez. But they're both just solid pitchers that, again, I would have more interest in if I couldn't just plug in Ohtani and DeGrom in most lineups. But, yeah, just two really good arms. Not great matchups, not terrible matchups. They're kind of just secondary pitching options on both sides.
Okay. And then how about the bats? I mean, with both solid pitchers, not a huge implied run total for either team, but tell me, do you have any interest in either of these teams?
Not too much. I do have a lot of respect for both pitchers. Lynn does have some issues with left-handed power. That's always been an issue for him. He has corrected it a bit over the last few seasons, but still a 187 expected ISO to lefties since last year compared to 137 to righties. His strikeout percentage against lefties over that time is also 7 points lower than against righties. So he is somebody where at least there are some pretty big splits where you can, look to Trevor Larnach, Nick Gordon, hope that they have some success. But the problem here is that the Twins really just don't have left-handed power in their lineup. Both of those guys are fine, but obviously the best hitters here are right-handed, and the lineup as a whole is predominantly right-handed.
Yep. Andrew Martinez says, couldn't you play one of Ohtani or DeGrom with a lower priced pitcher?
Yes.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could.
Yeah. If you like your stack and you can't fit in both of them, I mean, certainly I don't think you need to be jamming them in if they don't fit into the lineup that you like.
Right.
But a lot of lineups, like if you're using Optimizer, I think a lot of lineups are just going to give you both of Ohtani and DeGrom in a lot of your lineups.
Yeah, I can't see right now what percentage of my lineups have both. If the slate started right now, I can see that I would have 67% Ohtani and 57% DeGrom. So I would think that there's a lot where it is one of them and then a different pitcher, but it really is just going to come down to what stacks you're getting to.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of how good of a play there, guys, we've got DeGrom with a projection of 23, Shohei Ohtani with a projection of 23. This is on DraftKings. And then the third best projection on the slate is Pablo Lopez at 17. So just kind of a big drop down in projection. And that matters more with pitchers than bats just because it's a little bit more projectable in general.
And even in terms of range of outcomes, looking at the top pitchers tool, Ohtani and DeGrom, 33% chance of being a top 2 pitcher for Ohtani, 32.5 for DeGrom. Next is Lopez at 15.8. So you're talking about both of those guys basically being twice as likely to finish as a top 2 scoring pitcher compared to every other pitcher on the slate.
We're being asked for a favorite pitcher on FanDuel tonight. Do you have a favorite pitcher on FanDuel off the top of your head? I'm opening up the top pitchers tool so I can give an opinion here.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be either Ohtani or DeGrom.
Yep, they're both Ohtani is at 10,800, DeGrom 10,600, both double-digit odds of being the top pitcher. Ohtani does have a slightly better, in terms of our top pitcher tool, Ohtani a little bit better than DeGrom, but still a wide gap between those two, and then the third best, which is, again, Pablo Lopez. So, yeah, I'd probably go to Ohtani first against Washington, but I think you can make a case for either of them. All right, back to Twins, White Sox. Anything else you want to say about this game?
No, I mean, I guess it kind of does go back to, or the inverse, I guess, of what I was saying about hating the Twins lineup the way it sets up against Lynn. Is maybe this is like a sneaky good spot for Lynn, just because you are getting so many right-handed bats. He has been dominant against righties basically forever. But it's still, I don't know how actionable that is. If you're on the fence about playing Lynn, I would say that the projected lineup is favorable for him. It's just, again, DeGrom and Ohtani just at broken price points. It's like, yeah, cool, Lance Lynn looks better than normal, but he still doesn't look like Jacob DeGrom or Shohei Ohtani.
Right. Yeah, somebody asking in chat, who is the Andrew Heaney of tonight's slate? So last night, I know Greg and I both really liked Heaney, worked out well. Of course, they pulled him fairly early too, but worked out pretty well. Do you see any pitcher here that you think is going to be a little bit under-owned who has the upside of an Andrew Heaney?
Lynn?
Yeah, Lynn's a good bet.
But to be clear, I don't think either of them are. Like, right. I think picking an Andrew Heaney on this slate is just inventing something, because the thing was yesterday, like Andrew Heaney's strikeout percentage was 5 points higher than any other pitcher on yesterday's slate. He had Scherzer beat, and it's literally just, if he's managing to keep the ball in the park, he's going to put up monster numbers. You don't have a guy on this slate that like you can look at and say like, oh, well, he strikes out more hitters than DeGrom. If he just doesn't give up home runs, he'll be great. That guy doesn't exist today.
Thomas Romano says Neil looks like Mario in a live-action Super Mario. I don't even have a mustache. I feel like both of these comparisons are supposed to be guys with mustaches. I got a full beard. This isn't a Mario look. Come on. All right. We will move on. Next up, we've got the Cubs and Seattle. First, though, let me tell you guys again that Bet365 offer that I mentioned earlier, and I teased it a little bit. People only in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, or Virginia. The deal at Bet365, you bet $1 and you will get $200 in bonus bets at Bet365. Unbeatable deal there. You're risking just $1, and of course the upside is unlimited. If you win your bets, you have to play through them at least once, of course, before you can cash out. But you can keep playing as long as you want until you lose all your money, and of course all you would lose in that case is $1. So fantastic deal at Bet365. Of course, remember, the legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. But yeah, I think that is a fantastic deal at Bet365, about as good as you're ever going to find anywhere. And don't think it's going to last all that much longer. So again, if you live in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, or Virginia, make sure you do sign up at Bet365. The link is in the description of this video to take advantage of that offer. Okay, back to the games. Next up, again, we have the Cubs and Seattle. In Wrigley Field, Hayden Wesneski on the mound for the Cubs, Chris Flexen for the Mariners. Start with the pitchers. Any interest in Wesneski or Flexen?
No, not particularly. Neither one is a very good strikeout pitcher. Wesneski didn't spend a lot of time in the majors last year, but struck out 22.5% of hitters. He was solid enough, but just not somebody I think really need to get to on this slate. Flexen, 15.8% strikeout percentage last year, xFIP north of 5. Doesn't strike me as the type of slate where I need to pay down for him. You do also have the wind blowing out in Wrigley, so that's working against these guys as well.
Yeah, well, with that in mind, then, do you have increased interest in the bats here with the wind blowing out? Tell me about your level of interest in the Cubs or the Mariners.
Yeah, I think it makes it really interesting. Wrigley wind games are sort of similar to Coors in that a lot of times you'll see like really, really increased ownership going to the Wrigley game, but that's not really the case today because you have the Cardinals. So the Cubs coming in at 8% projected ownership, Seattle coming in at 9%. They're both projected to be a little bit overowned, but when you compare them to St. Louis, you're still getting like 1/4 the ownership. So it certainly makes them appealing. Both teams have implied run totals north of 5. And neither pitcher is great. So yeah, I do like getting to this game, especially if that projected ownership gap stays between them and the Cardinals.
Okay. And do you say you have interest in both of these stacks?
Yeah. And I was trying to kind of quickly look. Wesneski last year, 33% fly ball percentage, 25%, or sorry, that's this year, 25% line drive percentage. Last year, 41% fly ball percentage, 11.5% line drive percentage, 47% ground ball rate. At AAA, he
Did I lose you? Can you guys hear Adam?
that?
I lost you for a second. Now I hear you again. Was
Yeah,
something in
no,
the
it's
background?
an ad started playing on my computer, but I can't figure out where it's coming from.
Couldn't hear anything.
Okay.
You just it drowned you out apparently.
Okay, so I was just looking up Wisniewski's ground ball percentage in the minors. He was 47% in the majors last year, 48% in 2022 in the minors, but still just somebody that doesn't miss a lot of contact. So I like getting to both offenses.
Yep, absolutely. And do you have any favorite one-offs from either of these teams?
Let me see. From the Chicago side, I do like Bellinger. The price tag's really cheap, and obviously he's had some issues in recent years, but just a lot of upside there. Ian Happ looks good too. He's expensive. On the other side, it's pretty much always going to be Julio Rodriguez, but I do like Cal Raleigh as a very high upside catcher option. Jared Kelenick's a good value play as well.
Yeah, and you say you do have interest in full stacking these. I mean, what are we looking at for ownership here? Let me pull up the top stack. So we've got Seattle at 9.4% ownership. So they're not going. Yeah, I guess these are both teams that are getting some ownership, but also have both in the top five in terms of top stack odds overall. Yeah, so definitely a good game to target there. Anything else you want to say about this game?
Nope.
All right. Well, we have the Rangers at the Royals. Of course, we've talked about Jacob deGrom on the mound for the Rangers, Jordan Lyles for the Royals. Tell me about your level of. I mean, we've talked about it throughout the show. It's not. We've teased it a little bit. How much interest do you have in Jacob deGrom here? Any interest in Jordan Lyles?
Yeah, certainly a lot of interest in deGrom. I mean, when the guy's healthy, he's just so good. I pulled up the FanGraphs leaderboard to just see, all the strikeout percentages going back to last year, and deGrom's at 42.7%. So I just immediately assumed I had pulled up this year and was looking at like 2 starts worth of data. But no, since the start of last year, 42.7% strikeout percentage for deGrom. He's just insanely good when he's on the mound. He's my favorite pitcher here. I mentioned I'm getting a little bit more Ohtani right now, but in terms of actual projection, I have deGrom first, followed by Ohtani. Very, very close. You could certainly make the argument in either direction, but not a great strikeout matchup, but also not a great offense that he's going up against. He's fully stretched out. He struggled in his first start of the year. Through 73 pitches, went 3 2/3. Followed that up though against Baltimore, 6 innings, 92 pitches. So we shouldn't have any pitch count concerns or anything like that. deGrom just looks great.
Yep, absolutely. And you say no interest in Lyles, really?
No interest in Lyles.
Okay. And then on the other side of it, I mean, the Royals are going to be low owned, I'm sure, against deGrom. Any interest in playing the Royals, and what's your level of interest in the Rangers?
I do not have any interest in the Royals. Texas, I think it is a pretty good spot. I'm trying to look now to see sort of like how I'd be getting to them. I wouldn't be getting any crazy amounts of Texas, just kind of like 5 to 10% across the board on these guys if the slate started right now. But I do think it's a good spot against Lyles. He does give up power. It's not a great hitter's park like their old stadium was in Texas, but 194 expected ISO to lefties, 180 to righties since last year. You have Corey Seager, who is always one of the highest upside shortstop options. Nathaniel Lowe is good. Josh Young's a top hitting prospect. Garcia's got a ton of power. Semyon's always one of the highest upside second baseman. Jonah Heim's always a high upside catcher option. So there's a lot to like from Texas. I wouldn't be upset if I started getting more of them as the day goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Over a 5-run implied total. So looking good on that front. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No.
All right. Well, we've got the Coors game coming up next. So that's always an interesting game theory thing to talk about with Coors. But first, let me tell you, we do have a 50% offer off everything at Stokastic. 50% off any sport, platinum, weekly or monthly. Click the link in the description of this video or use promo code SCORE. That's SCORE. Get access to everything Stokastic has to offer, including ownership, lineup generator, lineup builder, boom bust, leverage scores, and our industry leading projections. This is for first time users only. Again, use promo code SCORE and you can get 50% off basically anything we have to offer at Stokastic. Fantastic deal there. Make sure you take advantage of that. All right, Adam, Coors Field, Miles Mikolas, Kyle Freeland on the mound. We'll start with the pitchers. Are you playing either of these pitchers in Coors Field?
No, I'm not looking to play either pitcher.
Okay, easy enough. We'll jump right into the stack. So these are going to be two of the higher owned stacks on the board. St. Louis coming in at 34% ownership. I guess Colorado down at 6%. So pretty differing in that from that perspective. Tell me about your level of interest in these stacks or one-offs from this game.
So clearly interested in the Cardinals. I think that it would be just a mistake to say that you're not interested.
Right.
Also very concerned about the amount of ownership they have coming in. Right now, they would be my highest owned team, but just not on the same level as the field. Looking individually at the ownership here, Tommy Edmonds projected 40%, Tyler O'Neill and Contreras are 33, Goldschmidt's 32, Yepez 32, Arenado 31, Walker 29, Carlson 27. So the problem here is not only are they popular individually, but when you start stacking them as a 5-man, that's like 5 dudes that you're just rostering that are necessarily 20+% owned. And it makes it pretty difficult to get contrarian elsewhere. Like, sure, you can mix them with low owned teams, but especially in large field tournaments, like every version of a Cardinal stack is going to have a lot of competition. So that's sort of the concern there. I kind of like approaching this a little bit more where maybe you're 5-man stacking a low owned team and then mixing in Goldschmidt, Arenado, those guys here and there. Looking at my personal exposures if the slate started right now, and to kind of illustrate what I was saying about they're my highest owned team, but I'm also just below the field. Edmund and Contreras would be my 2 highest owned Cardinals at 34 and 30%. O'Neill at 24, and then everybody else 16% or below. So Edmund and Contreras are getting more exposure just because of their positions. So they're good value plays, but they're also at relatively weak positions. The rest of these guys, though, like there's always a million good first basemen. Is Paul Goldschmidt one of the best, if not the best first base plays on the slate? Sure. But there's just no shortage of high upside first basemen you can get to, high upside outfielders you can get to. So I'd be getting plenty of this team, just not nearly as much as the field's projected to.
When you see a team that projects this well and is also getting this much ownership, does it make you more inclined to play them as a full stack and then just get really different with the rest of your lineup? Or are you more inclined to play, some one-offs from this game because obviously every bat projects really well? How are you more inclined to approach this? Or I mean, is it a mix?
It varies. On a slate like this, I think it's more likely that I end up mixing in Cardinals as like mini stacks with a lower owned stack. One thing that kind of dictates that is that I am certainly on the popular pitching. So that's another thing. If like you had a pitching slate where nobody really looks that good and the field's going to prioritize a couple of guys because like there's always going to be chalk pitching. But if it were just like, oh, well, I don't think that the most popular pitchers are that much better than low-owned pitchers, then it would be easier to say, like, all right, well, I'm going to 5-man stack the Cardinals. I'm going to pair them with some low-owned 3-man stack, and then I'm going to play 2 10% owned pitchers, and I'm good. But today, I think there's such a big gap between DeGrom, Ohtani, and every other pitcher that I'm not willing to give those guys up just to get more Cardinals bats. And if I start trying to play them with the Cardinals, then I'm holding hands even more than I already was.
Right, you're only going to have a few spots that you can potentially get different if you do play those 2 pitchers with the Cardinals. Yeah, that makes sense. It's obviously always kind of slate dependent. I think that's usually our takeaway. Is it depends. The answer to most questions, it depends on the slate, and on this one, yeah, easier to not full stack and just have a few players. What about the Rockies on the other side though? Obviously getting much less ownership than St. Louis. The Rockies we have coming in at just under 6% projected ownership. Do you have interest in a Rockies stacking course?
A little bit. I mean, Michaelis isn't a bad pitcher by any stretch. The Rockies offense is bad. But it is, the other side, of course. You are still in a great hitter's park and you're just not getting nearly as much ownership. So I'm getting some. I'm not getting a ton. Montero would be my highest owned guy from Colorado right now at like 17%. Diaz, Tovar, both at weak positions. Then you start getting like 10% Bryant, 10% Profar, 8% Blackman. So, all those guys are fine. Right now, collectively, we have Colorado pulling 6% aggregate ownership. So I guess it would be fair to say that I'd be over the field on them, but not by any crazy amount.
Okay. Anything else about this Coors game before we move on?
No, just be aware that St. Louis pricing is just broken. So you're going to have a lot of ownership coming in there. But this is also just a situation where like why it's important to have some sort of a process that doesn't just rely strictly on median projections, because if you're not doing something to account for ownership or account for, forcing an optimizer to give you, sort of different sets of lineups, it's just gonna spit out so much Cardinals because they are clearly like the top point per dollar plays across the board.
Actually, this game is a good chance to touch on cash just a little bit, because you've been playing cash games a little bit more, and it's easy for you to fit in, both those pitchers with a full St. Louis stack. Do you have opinions about stacking in cash games in general? Like, do you care whether your lineup is stacked at all in cash games?
I think that at the very least, you shouldn't care. You could certainly make the case that stacking is better than people give it credit for. The argument that I don't know how often people make it anymore, but the argument that I've seen in the past is that stacking is bad in cash because, like, if an offense does poor, like, you're basically that you're
It increases
lowering your floor
volatility.
because if an offense does poorly. But I think it's sort of the opposite. If you have a team like the Cardinals that have a 6-run implied total or whatever it is, 6.8, you don't know exactly where that hitting is going to come from. And I don't want to say, like, oh, well, I'm only going to play 3 Cardinals because stacking is risky, and then I'm really trying to guess which 3 Cardinals happen to have a good game. I think it actually increases your floor a little bit to say, like, all right, I'm just getting the maximum number of guys from this team. So I don't typically set stacking rules for cash, but like today, I will be absolutely shocked if I don't have 5 Cardinals, and that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so you are I mean, almost pro stacking in cash games, if that is the way it works out. Like, you would not, if you were breaking a tie, you would be more inclined to break a tie in favor of a larger stack versus going the opposite direction.
I'd probably break it first by batting order,
Okay.
but yes, like I definitely don't view it as, like, oh, I have, like, right now, if the slate started, I'd have Contreras, Goldschmidt, Edman, O'Neill, and Jordan Walker. I'm certainly not viewing this like, oh, I already have 4 Cardinals, let me turn Jordan Walker into somebody else. Like, I'd rather be Jordan Walker than most people, just because he does correlate with everybody else.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I guess I haven't thought about it that deeply about cash games, but it's a good point that you don't know. It's not like, individual players where, like, it has to come from that player where you're projecting with a stack. It is, I like that. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I think that's a smart take, that you should maybe be a little bit more inclined to stack if that's the way the projections come out in general.
Yeah, like, you don't want to be sacrificing too much. Normally, I'll just sort of crunch to see what my top lineups look like, and then I will set, like, a 5-man stack and see how much you're giving up in terms of projection. And normally, it's going to be like less than a point anyway, which, when you're talking baseball, is very, very negligible. So that's sort of why I think that there could be a case that people actually don't stack enough in cash. If you are really only sacrificing like half a point of median projection, and you're getting increased correlation. Also, and this is sort of just the way the game is now, there's so much overlap too. Like, if you're building, typically, like, I'm sure there are some people that, have their own projections and they're great, and they do end up being frequently different than everybody and they're good, whatever. But for the most part, you're going to end up on very, very, very similar builds. Like, I know going into any DraftKings cash slate that I'm either playing the same lineup as, like, McLovin, or we have like a 2-person swap. So there's a part of me that also thinks, like, stacking might be better too, because even in these, like, 20-person 50-50s, so many times, like, 8 or 9 people now have the same lineup that it's almost worth it to, like, win, a little bit less often, but actually get your full double up as opposed to 1.5xing.
Yep. Makes sense. We had a few other questions. So Michael Mass, he was sort of getting to the question I just asked you, but he asked, I guess I can ask more generally, how do your cash games in general differ from your tournament lineups?
Just much more focused on median projection. Floor as much as you can. I mean, floor in baseball is kind of a made up thing, but
right.
With
pitchers a little bit.
Yeah, pitchers a little bit. And again, like I said, with like batting order, like
right.
in a tournament. So like right now, the projected lineup for the Cardinals that I'm looking at has Juan Yepez hitting 9th and Tyler O'Neill hitting 6th. In a tournament, I don't really care who I have out of O'Neill or Juan Yepez, in a just given tournament lineup. Obviously, O'Neill's the better play, but him batting, Yepez batting 9th isn't like, oh, I don't want to play this guy. In cash games, that is going to matter more because you're just expecting one less opportunity to hit.
Yep, absolutely. Deacon to the Legends, in a low dollar single entry on FanDuel, would you fade the Cardinals?
Low dollar single entry on FanDuel. No, I mean, so definitely not by design. Like, I wouldn't be going in just saying I'm not going to play the Cardinals. I would ideally be trying to figure out how I can play the Cardinals and be different. if that ends up being a problem, then you always in baseball you always can fade the highest owned team. Like it's never a mistake by itself. Like basketball, for anybody that played NBA basketball, you get these guys where it's just like, oh, he's $4,000, he's starting at point guard, he's going to play 36 minutes, and you kind of have to be a moron not to play him. That doesn't exist in baseball. There's so much variance in baseball that you should never be afraid to get away from. If you can't get a lineup that you like with the stack that you feel best about or most want to get to, you shouldn't be afraid to just go to a different one because there's a ton of variance and they're going to fail constantly. Low stakes, you should expect lower ownership on the best plays. So that does ideally kind of push you towards, I think, playing the Cardinals a little bit more. If you were playing like a high stakes single entry, instead of the Cardinals being like 30% owned, they're probably gonna be like 50%. But if you're playing like a $1 single entry, they might be like 20%, in which case the merit of getting away from them obviously is lower.
Why do you think that is? I didn't realize that you'd that lower stakes it would be less people going to the best plays. Do you think that's because people are not using projections, or do you think that's because people are have less at risk, so they're willing to go away from it a little bit more?
I think it's just more casuals, people not using projections, people with a less data-driven approach. I think that at higher stakes, it kind of goes too far the other direction. Like, I still don't necessarily think that a lot of the high stakes guys are playing contrarian enough, but a lot of that too. And it's kind of where like if you understand nuanced stuff, you can kind of take advantage of it in some areas. A lot of guys that are playing high stakes single entry, like they're playing $40,000 of cash and everything else. Like they don't care about this $300 single entry lineup. They're just throwing their highest projected lineups in and hoping that things go well. So if you're somebody that you're not playing that level of volume, you can kind of take advantage of that, and that's why you see the ownership get as concentrated as it does.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Arcathel says back says in low dollar might as well play the Cardinals. They don't know what they're doing. Yeah. So yeah, it's in agreement there. All right, where were we? We just got through. We're getting to now. Moving on to the Angels at the Nationals. Shohei Ohtani on the mound for the Angels. Josiah Gray for the Nats. We've teased how much interest you have in Ohtani. Any interest in Josiah Gray? And you can just tell me about your level of interest in both these pitchers.
Yeah, not a ton of interest in Gray. He does have good strikeout stuff. You do have some strikeouts in the Angels lineup, but it's just, again, it's not a slate where I'm finding myself needing to take on a bunch of risk at pitcher or pay down a bunch at pitcher. So I would be getting like 5% Josiah Gray on DraftKings right now, and that's about it. Shohei Ohtani, like I said, getting around 67%. Just a great strikeout pitcher, second highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind DeGrom, 33.2% since last year. He is pretty clearly the best pitcher on the slate, not named DeGrom. DeGrom is just his own separate level of pitcher. But Ohtani looks great. The matchup's fine. Not a ton of strikeouts necessarily, but also just a bad lineup in general. 2.8 implied run total. Love getting to Ohtani. More difficult to get to Gray.
Yep. What about the bats on the other side? I mean, you're gonna be playing any Nationals against Ohtani?
Not playing the Nats against Ohtani, no.
Okay. How about the Angels against Josiah Gray?
A little surprised right now that I'm not getting more of them. This is definitely a team sort of like Texas, where if I started to get more, I would not be upset because Josiah Gray does give up plenty of power. He does have decent strikeout stuff, like I said, but 264 expected ISO to lefties since the start of last season, 154 to righties. It's not a great park to pitch in now that they've moved the wall in a few years ago. So it sucks with the Angels that you can't roster Shohei Ohtani. You're obviously just losing one of not only one of the best hitters on the team, but a middle of the order bat. So it kind of makes your stacks just sort of wonky. I would probably be getting a lot more of them if I could roster Ohtani, but Ward, Trout, Rendon, if he's back in, Renfroe, all are going to look pretty good. Jake Lamb from the left side. I do wish this team had more power or more left-handed power rather, in addition to wishing I could roster Ohtani. He kind of, would kill two birds with one stone, but I think it's a high upside spot. I'm not getting to a lot of them right now, though.
How would you like for DraftKings to handle Shohei Ohtani? Should they make him two separate players? Should they make him one super player with like a $22,000 price tag at pitcher? How would you like for these sites to handle Shohei Ohtani?
Two separate players would probably be the best. It would probably also be a headache for anybody that creates data that creates projections or anything like that. That's probably the way I'd want to handle it. The super player thing, I wouldn't have as much of an issue with now. I used to think it was a really dumb argument because people are like, "Oh, why doesn't Ohtani get hitting stats?" It's like, there's like 15, before the DH. It was like, there's like 15 pitchers a night that are hitting and they don't get hitter stats, right?
Right.
Yes, Ohtani's the only one that's good at it, but like, why is he special? But now that he is the only pitcher hitting, I guess you could make that case a little bit easier.
Yeah, so I mean, they could have just included it for all pitchers, include
Right.
the hitting stats, like they do for like in NFL. A quarterback, if a quarterback gets a reception, it still counts as a reception, so it's a little bit different.
Right.
Um,
It would, like, I'm glad that they don't or never did, just because like that would. There's already so much variance in baseball that's just like incredibly annoying that like I don't want to get left behind because I didn't play Zach Greinke in his home run. Like so I'm glad that they never did that, but you certainly could make the case, and then it would have just turned guys like Greinke, Bumgarner into like rushing quarterbacks, basically.
right. Yep. Yeah. Josh Gillum says they should let you roster him at either at pitcher or hitter, but not both. Yeah. So that I
Yeah,
mean
wouldn't have any issues with that.
yeah, if you have the option at both, but you can. I don't know if that would be difficult for them to do. Like it's probably not part of their algorithm, that kind of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with that either. Yeah, one of the
To
more
answer,
interesting.
Michael Mass said, "Did you just ask why Otani was special?" Yeah, in the context of before the DH, every National League pitcher pitched and hit, and Otani pitches and hits. Like, yes, obviously he's better at hitting, but it's the same exact thing. Yeah, I'm not asking why he's special in terms of like as a player. That's very, very obvious.
Yep. Yeah, Brooke Bondi. I think that's what we're saying. They could have two Otanis in the player pool, pitcher and hitter at different salaries. I think that's probably would be most of our favorite approach, probably. Anyway, just an aside there. Anything else you want to say about this Angels or Washington, about this game in general?
No.
All right, then we'll move on to Milwaukee at Arizona. Corbin Burns on the mound for the Brewers. Merrill Kelly for the Diamondbacks. Start with the pitchers once again. Any interest in an 8,500 Corbin Burns or a 7,100 Merrill Kelly here?
I think it's an interesting price tag on Burns. In theory, he's a good pitcher. I wouldn't be getting too much on this slate. I only would have around 2%, but he's really struggled through his first couple of starts this year. I don't want to read into that too much. He does have a 30.5% strikeout percentage, sub 3 xFIP since the start of last year. It's likely that you just got a couple of bad starts out of him. I'm trying to pull up now just to check his velocity. 95.5 miles an hour on his fastball, 95 miles an hour in his second start. So doesn't seem like there's anything too problematic there. He averaged 96 miles an hour on it last year. So down half a mile an hour. So probably fine. Decent spot, really good pitcher. We have him projected right now for only 5% ownership, which is interesting. So I think he's going a little bit under owned. I'm just still also having trouble getting to a lot of him.
Yeah, makes sense. And no interest in Merrill Kelly?
No, just not enough strikeouts from him. He's an okay real life pitcher, but I have trouble sacrificing strikeouts on a slate like this where you have so many good strikeout pitchers.
Yeah, it's tough with on this slate. I'm trying to look at top pitchers. So yeah, okay, 5% ownership. Yeah, we do have a 12.5% chance of Corbin Burns being a top 2 pitcher. Yeah, I'd have some interest there at Arizona, but yeah, definitely tough with the Aces being so good. I haven't built out lineups yet.
There's still just such a big gap in terms of medium projection between him and DeGrom, Ohtani.
Yeah,
and then he's more expensive than Manoah, Lopez.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. All right. Anything else from this game? Actually, we didn't even talk about the bats yet, did we? Tell me about your level of interest in either the Diamondbacks or the Brewers as stacks, as one-offs. How much interest do you have?
Actually getting to a lot of Arizona right now, which is odd. Hopefully Burns continues to suck, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they're a decent offense. They're not super expensive. 4 implied run total is low, but not crazy low. I just like being able to get to Rojas, Marte, Corbin Carroll's cheap, Christian Walker's pretty cheap, Gabby Moreno's got upside as a very cheap catcher option. So I think they're a team that I'm probably using pretty frequently when I go DeGrom, Ohtani. I think that would make sense. You're saving some money there. You're offsetting some ownership. You can also be mixing the Cardinals in with a team like Arizona. I'm getting to Milwaukee as well, just not as much as I am Arizona, which is kind of surprising to me right now, but I also get it.
Okay. Michael Mass says, if you could not play Ohtani or DeGrom, who would your next 2 pitchers up be?
Manoah and Lopez.
Yeah. Looks good to me. I don't have, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I might go to Corbin Burns there just because I think that it's interesting to me that maybe he still has a ton of upside. So I might go to Burns and Lopez, but yeah, I mean, just looking at the top pitches tool, it would be Lopez and Manoah have the highest odds after. I mean, it's Ohtani, DeGrom, huge gap, and then Lopez, Manoah next in terms of top tier pitcher odds. So
also, if I couldn't roster Ohtani, DeGrom, I would probably be working Kyle Wright in a bit more.
Interesting. Yeah, Kyle Wright in a good spot against Cincinnati. Yeah, it's smart. I probably wouldn't play though. If I couldn't play Ohtani and DeGrom and everybody else could, I'd just take the slate off.
Yeah. If I'm the only one that these rules apply to, I will not play.
Yeah, in this hypothetical. I guess we got to define the rules in this hypothetical. All right. And anything else from this Brewers and Diamondbacks game?
No.
Adam, your twin is pitching tonight for the Dodgers against the Giants. It's Dustin May going up against Alex Wood. Tell me your level of interest in either May or Wood tonight.
Both good pitchers. May has looked good. He's getting more strikeouts, but still just difficult for me to roster on this slate. Same goes for Alex Wood on the other side. Certainly not looking to go out of my way and roster pitching against the Dodgers all that often.
Who do you think this is in chat? Stochastic Daily. Is this Josh?
No, it's me.
It's you. Oh, I didn't know that you could do that. Wow.
Neither did I. You. I just typed and that's how it showed up.
Crazy. Cool. All right. I wasn't listening. I was too interested in that. Who is this? I wasn't even listening that closely. You said that you do have some. They're both good pitchers, hard to get to, but you'd want to get to some in a large field.
Probably wouldn't have much of either. I think if I went to one, I would go to May first.
Okay. Yep. Is that because of the way he looks, or is it because you think he's a better pitcher? Okay.
Yeah. No, it's purely based on appearance.
All right.
He should be a better strikeout pitcher than he is. It still hasn't really converted this year. But the stuff's nasty. It's just a matter of him prioritizing strikeouts as opposed to ground balls. But until he starts doing that consistently, it's going to be a tough sell, especially when he's at this elevated price tag.
Yep, for sure. And then on the other side of it, I mean, two pretty solid offenses. The Dodgers, obviously one of the best in the game. How much interest, if any, do you have in stacking the Dodgers, the Giants, one-offs? Tell me about your level of interest in the bats in this game.
Happy to get to the Dodgers whenever they're not popular. I said the same thing yesterday. Didn't end up really getting to much of them. Wouldn't be getting to much of them right now, but it's just one of those teams where you're never wrong if you go that route. The Dodgers are just clearly good tournament plays when they're going to be 2% owned in the aggregate. They're such a good offense. So many guys on that team have massive power that it's sort of like normally when they're low owned, it's going to be, they're facing a good pitcher, but they're just such good hitters that the low ownership typically is going to offset the risk of taking them against a good pitcher and give you a really, really high ceiling.
Yeah, it's hard not to like the Dodgers when they're we've got them in the top stack tool, 2% projected ownership, 5% chance of being a top stack. That's a great spot. Really hard not to have a lot of interest there. The Dodgers, the Yankees, the Padres. What kind of stacks would you put in that bucket of if they're going to be low owned? I'm probably playing them.
Yeah, Padres, Dodgers, Yankees are probably the first three that come to mind. Like they just have such good offenses, relatively deep lineups too. So it's not like if you stack them, you have to stack the same five guys as everybody else. Like they have hitters top to bottom that look good.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else that you want to say about this game, or should we do some dong picks?
Yeah, we can do dong picks.
All right. Do you have any? I have not given any thought to a dong pick here. It was in the description of the video though, so I think that we should think about who we might take as dong picks here.
Yeah, I hadn't given it any thought. I had retired last year, but I will come back from it.
That's right, because you were undefeated. You got
yeah.
Were you 1 for 1 or 2 for 2, or what was your
1 for 1? The only time I had ever done it, just it hit. So then I stopped. Nice. Yeah, this slate was kind of weird. There's like a lot of good pitching.
Whoa.
There weren't a lot of spots that I looked at and were like, oh, like this looks great for individual hitters. Shohei Ohtani, but he's not in the player pool.
Can you hear what's going on my computer?
No.
My computer is getting a security warning. I don't know what is going on, but it's acting up, and there's nothing that I can do right now. Yeah, so we're gonna have to end the show. I can't even look at it. It's talking to me too much. This has never happened before. Apparently, there's an identity theft issue on my computer right now. So Adam, did you give your home run pick?
So I said Otani. He's not in the player pool though, so I'll also go Corey Seager against Jordan Lyles.
Okay. Sounds good. I am not going to give a home run pick because this person is screaming at me with the security thing. So we are going to have to end the show. I'm going to have to just shut my computer down. But thank you guys very much for joining us. Please do like the video on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. Thanks a lot, guys.